Not
Can
you.
you give us a chance?
Your organization's
you are attacking
terrible.
our news organization.
Your organization's
Can you give us
terrible.
a chance
Let's
to
go.
ask a question, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, can
Quiet.
you state,
Quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you
She's
state
asking a question. Don't
Mr.
be rude.
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
Hey guys, I hope that was fun because the rest of this will not be nearly as exciting. This week's topic is the President and the Media. This presentation will cover Chapter 7 of the Presidential Leadership Textbook. The main aspects of this chapter that I will be talking about are how relationships function between the President and the press, how the President has been historically covered by the mainstream media, and the effects of the media on the office of the presidency. The media and the President have always had a tenuous relationship, but one that highly benefits both of them. Traditionally, the only way that a president could communicate with the public was through the press and traditional media. Now, despite the ability of the presidents to communicate with the public more directly, for better or for worse, many of the vestiges of this old system are still being used, like presidential press conferences, weekday White House briefings, and TV interviews. National press outlets also benefit from their coverage of the president, especially as online engagement becomes increasingly important for them to earn ad revenue. Because of this, the press reports on the president in an interesting way, as they emphasize clickability and entertainment value. From as far back as Woodrow Wilson's presidency, there have been complaints about the superficial nature of presidential reporting. Keeping in mind the goal of the media is to get attention in order to sell ads, it makes sense that press coverage focuses more on the juicy scandals and spilling the tea than they might on nuts and bolts policy issues. It is hard to blame the press for just earning their paychecks, so maybe this is an area to consider when we talk about media reform. If journalists weren't so concerned with TV ratings or clicks when writing about the president, they would have the freedom to write about more substantial and newsworthy aspects of the administration. This section also discusses how bias might play a role in the media about the president. What was surprising, at least to me, was the statement in the text that most mass media news coverage is not systematically biased towards any people, parties, or specific ideologies. My first reaction to this was skepticism, as a brief Google search turns up partisan bias media maps like this one, that I'm sure most of us have seen at this point. Not to mention headlines like these from Tuesday's presidential debate coverage. That being said, though, the authors do defend their point by citing potential incentives that journalists have to be more objective, including journalistic integrity, credibility, and professionalism. While these points make sense theoretically, my personal media consumption in the last 4 years gives me doubts that journalism actually strives to be objective. This is pretty concerning, as the media has a lot of power over how the public views the president. For example, the amount of knowledge that voters have about a presidential policy issue directly correlates to how much media attention that topic gets. It is hard to remedy this, because most of our knowledge about the goings-on in the White House comes from the press. They have the power to interpret, contextualize, and frame very different narratives from one another that are all based on the same base information. Ultimately, free press and independent journalism are more important than ever, even if they are not perfect. I hope our discussion in class explores how we can preserve them and what updates need to be made, as well as these food for thought questions. Now that social media has given presidents a more direct line to the American people, how has the role of the press changed? Is this a good or a bad thing for the president? Is this a good or a bad thing for the people? Also, do you agree with the points raised by the authors of the textbook that the media does not necessarily contain explicit partisan bias? Have the ideals of objective journalism been squandered by increased polarization? My money's on yes.